I married a psychopath in a religious cult because a prophet told me to, and now we are after the Disney World burger incident and we are on our way back to Atlanta. On the way back to Atlanta, I am absolutely spinning because you have to imagine that I had been trying to hide Ted's abuse for a very, very long time, and I had done so somewhat successfully. So the fact that this all happened in front of my cousin, it felt like there was no turning back, and I was going to have to address this publicly for the first time. Some of you have asked, had I ever really thought about what I was going to do about having kids with Ted? Yes, and this is something that I had forgotten to say earlier, but it was a huge concern of mine that I did not know that I would ever have kids with Ted, because I knew that I would never subject a child to the type of abuse that I was living in. And I did not think that he would abuse our children. That's not necessarily what I thought, because I genuinely thought that it was something about me. Like, in my mind, I thought he is this like very religious man and everybody loves him, but it's something about me just really upsets him and he hates me essentially. But I knew that I would never let him speak to me like that in front of kids, because I would not want to damage whatever future kids we would have. So I had gotten to the point where I was thinking, well, maybe we will just never have children. But obviously everything that had just happened made me realize that I need to address these things now. And these are very serious concerns that I have, because the fact that he could not hold it together in front of my nephew, I had always kind of thought, well, maybe there's some moral part of him inside of him where he just wouldn't cross that line, because he had always just abused me in private. But to see him abuse me in such a public way in front of a child, yeah. So we came back home to Atlanta, and I think we got home at 1 or 2 in the morning, and then we decided that we were just going to talk about it in the morning because I had a lot of concerns. So I'm laying in bed and we're talking about this, and I'm telling him about how it was just not okay that he yelled at me in front of my nephew, and also just everything that he did on top of that, saying that he was going to strand me. And he is really digging his heels in and saying that I was wrong and I need to apologize for giving my cousin a bite of my burger. And I was refusing to apologize because I just thought it was so absurd. And I really stood my ground this time, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense, Ted. And he was just refusing to apologize at all for any of his actions. So after a while of talking, I'm laying on the bed and he's by the door, and I say, you know, would you yell at me in front of our kids? And he said, if you deserved it. So when he said that, I immediately responded and said, well, then I will not be having kids with you. And I meant it, because I just knew that I would never put up with that. And I would never damage children like that. And he ended up charging at me, and he ended up strangling me for the last time. And it was much worse than the first time. Yeah, it was much worse than the first time. And I ended up not being able to swallow without pain for, I think, 10 days. And I just, you know, went limp while it was happening. I just froze, and then he ended up getting up, and it was the exact same as the first time. He fell to the floor. He's crying. He's saying, please forgive me. I can't believe I just did that. And I was in shock. So this manipulation tactic of trying to get me to feel bad for him, despite the fact that he is the one that was perpetuating this abuse, did not work this time. I felt like I was done playing these games with him, and I was honestly genuinely terrified of him. I thought that maybe he would attack me further. So I asked him, please leave, like, please go. I think we needed groceries. It sounds so mundane in the midst of all of this, but I was like, please go, just like go get the groceries. Like, I need a minute. I don't want to be near you. And he ended up agreeing, and he left. And you know, I just was sitting in the apartment by myself and realizing, like, I think that I really need to talk to somebody. And I didn't feel like I could talk to anybody in my life, like, because I didn't know what the next steps were. I didn't know if I wanted to get divorced. I didn't know if I wanted to get divorced, if I was ready to say that. So I felt like I couldn't call my family. So I actually ended up calling the domestic violence hotline. So I was sitting at my kitchen table And I called this line, and I just remembered thinking, like, I never thought that my life was going to be like this. Like, I never thought I was going to be one of those women who is calling a hotline because they have nobody to talk to, or that's how it felt at the time. And you know, I had a clear view of the walkway to make sure that he wasn't coming back. And I called her and I just told her what happened. And she was so great. She just listened to me, and I started to, you know, make a lot of excuses for him. And I said, you know, I don't know if I'm in an abusive relationship. And I know that that sounds so stupid, guys. Like, I know. But I was in such a state of confusion because he would do nice things for me sometimes, and a lot of the abuse wasn't physical. I mean, obviously there were some physical abusive incidences, but a lot of them were more psychological. And she said, can I take you through a questionnaire? So she ended up reading me a list of like 14 or 15 things, and I think it said something like, you know, has he ever withheld money from you? Has he ever put his hands on you? Has he ever called you like derogatory names? And I ended up saying yes to, I think, like 11 of the 15 or something like that. It was like 80% of the questions. And she just read that back to me, you know, and what I appreciated about her is she didn't try to be like, see, you're in an abusive relationship. You know, she let the results speak for themselves. And, you know, I started to defend him, and I said, you know, you don't realize it. Like, he can be really nice sometimes. Like, it's more complicated than these answers. And she said, well, he knows he has to be nice because if he was mean all the time, he knows you would never stay. So she asked me if there was anybody that I could call. And, you know, as we're talking through all of this and unpacking everything, Ted started to walk up the walkway, and I ended up hanging up on her. And I said, hey, I have to go. He's coming back. Because I was afraid that he was going to be mad that I called them. And I cry every time I talk about this lady, because it was honestly kind of a dry conversation. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, we're soulmates, like after we talked or anything like that. But she was exactly what I needed at that time. She did not pressure me to do anything. And she just was there for me when I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody else. And she really helped me make sense of the situation that I was in. So I am a big advocate for the domestic violence hotline. My experience with them was exactly what I needed at the time. So in the next part, I'm going to talk about what my next steps were and how I was able to escape and go back to Texas.